I'm going to need you to take your business elsewhere, old-timer. This isn't a museum, and I don't have time to babysit somebody's grandfather." The voice cut through the shop like a blade through still water, sharp, dismissive, laced with the unearned confidence of youth dressed up as authority. It belonged to Craig Mercer, 43 years old, owner of Mercer's Tactical Supply, a man who wore his own prior service like a second skin, and who had spent the better part of a decade letting paying customers know, one way or another, that he was the most capable man in any room he entered. He stood behind the long glass counter, arms folded across a chest that still looked like it belonged to someone 10 years younger. Jaw set, eyes traveling up and down the man in front of him, with the particular contempt of someone who has decided the answer before he has heard the question. The man on the other side of the counter did not react. His name was Earl Decker. He was 81 years old. He wore a faded canvas jacket the color of old wheat, the kind that had absorbed enough rain and wood smoke over the decades that the smell had become part of the fabric itself. Beneath it, a plain gray work shirt, worn soft as skin. His jeans were clean but old, the knees pale where the denim had thinned. In his hands that were mapworks of wrinkles and liver spots, rivers of veins running across knuckles like polished river stones, he held a long cloth bundle, wrapped carefully in an old green chamois, tied at both ends with cord. He had carried it into the shop the way a man carries something that belongs to another century, with a casual reverence that would not have been visible to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. Craig Mercer was not paying close attention. "You hear me?" Mercer said, louder now. Two customers at the far end of the counter looked up, a younger man in a camo ball cap trying out a rifle sling, and a woman in her 30s waiting for a background check to clear. A teenage employee named Dustin Hale, 19 years old, stacking boxes of 308 near the back wall, went very still. Earl Decker finally raised his eyes. They were pale blue, the color of a winter sky over open country, and they possessed a depth that was difficult to look at directly for very long. Not threatening, not angry, not afraid. Simply deep in the way that certain things are deep, old wells, old rivers, old men who have watched a great many other men come and go. He looked at Craig Mercer for exactly 2 seconds before speaking. "I was hoping someone here could take a look at the action," he said. His voice was a low rasp, the sound of gravel rolling down a dry hillside unhurried. "She's cycling a little heavy. Probably the extractor spring. Could be the gas port. I'd fix it myself, but my hands have opinions about that kind of work these days." Mercer stared at him. "That some kind of antique?" "I don't do museum pieces, friend." Earl said nothing. He set the cloth bundle on the counter with the same quiet care with which he'd been holding it, and began working the cord loose at one end. The shop smelled the way gun shops smell, of Hoppy's No. 9 and Kilp and the particular metallic bite of steel and brass in close quarters, of fluorescent light and glass cases displaying row after row of pistols and rifles and accessories that gleamed under the artificial light like jewelry. The floors were sealed concrete, and every footstep echoed, just slightly. Country music played from a small speaker on a shelf, low enough to feel like background and loud enough to feel like company. A mounted whitetail buck watched from above the back wall with glass eyes that had been catching the same fluorescent light for a decade. Mercer's Tactical Supply had been open 11 years, and Craig Mercer knew every inch of it the way a man knows a place he built himself. The squeak in the third floorboard from the left. The particular chill near the front door in January. The way the light hit the long gun rack in the afternoon and made it look better than it needed to look. He had built this place. He was proud of it. He did not appreciate being ignored in it. He watched Earl unwrap one end of the chamois and decided he had seen enough before he had seen anything. "Sir," he put the word in front of the sentence the way some men use a door, as something to lean against. "I've got paying customers waiting, and I've got a rack of consignment rifles I need to inventory this afternoon. I don't have the time, and honestly I don't have the inclination to stand here while you unwrap whatever that is. So I'm going to ask you real politely one more time to take it somewhere else." The man in the camo ball cap had drifted slightly closer. Drawn the way people are drawn to a confrontation they didn't start but don't entirely mind watching. Dustin Hale had stopped stacking boxes entirely. He was pretending not to watch, which meant he was watching very carefully. Earl Decker paused in his unwrapping. He did not look up. "I'll be quick," he said. Something about those 3 words, the absolute absence of defensiveness in them, the total equanimity, made Craig Mercer's jaw tighten in a way he recognized as the beginning of real irritation rather than the performative kind. He had been in the Corps for 8 years. He had deployed twice and come back with a chest that looked good in photographs and a manner that communicated, efficiently and without excessive effort, that he was a man accustomed to compliance. He ran a business that attracted a clientele who respected that manner. He was not accustomed to being 3 words short of invisible. He glanced at the man in the ball cap and allowed something to cross his face, a slight upward pull at one corner of the mouth. The expression of a man who was being patient with something that did not deserve his patience. The man in the ball cap almost smiled back. The audience was in place. "You know what I think?" Mercer said, settling his weight onto the counter with both forearms, leaning forward in the posture of a man explaining something obvious to someone who has demonstrated limited capacity for the obvious. "I think you probably got that wrapped up nice from some estate sale somewhere. Or maybe it was your daddy's, and I think you drove it over here thinking somebody was going to tell you it's worth money or make it run pretty again for sentimental reasons, and I am genuinely sorry to be the one to tell you that is not the kind of service we provide. We're a working establishment. We carry serious equipment for serious people." He let that sit for exactly 1 beat. No offense to whatever that is. Mercer came around the counter. This was the 3rd stage, the physical stage, the stage where the performance required proximity to be fully convincing. He had 6 inches and 60 pounds on the old man, and he moved like someone who was aware of this, and had chosen to be aware of it. He stopped within arm's length of Earl and looked down with the practiced ease of a man used to ending conversations by appearing larger in them. "You know what, friend? I'm going to be straight with you since you don't seem to be hearing me." He reached out and put 2 fingers on the cloth-wrapped rifle, resting them there the way some men rest a hand on a shoulder, as if the gesture were friendly rather than what it was. This is a retail establishment. It is not a charity. It is not a walk-in clinic for old guns that have seen better days. You want service, you make an appointment, you come in with a receipt or a manufacturer's warranty, and you come in looking like you're going to spend some money. You understand what I'm telling you? His fingers pressed down on the chamois. And the smell of gun solvent and fluorescent light simply ceased to exist. The air was hot and wet and smelled of vegetation so thick and green it was almost a flavor. He was 19 years old and lying flat in the mud of the Quang Tri province in the Republic of Vietnam, rain slanting through triple canopy jungle in thin silver needles that hit the leaf litter and didn't bounce. Just vanished. Beside him, close enough to whisper, Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Pryor, the man they called Priest because of the calm that came off him when things went bad, was watching a ridgeline through field glasses while the rest of the team lay strung in the undergrowth like a string of dark beads. Raymond had the rifle then. The rifle that was now wrapped in old chamois cloth on the counter of a gun shop in Benton Falls, North Carolina. He'd taken it off a Marine gunnery sergeant at Quezon who'd said, "You've got the eye, son. You keep it. I'm rotating stateside in 30 days, and this weapon deserves to go forward, not backward." Raymond had carried it through 14 months and passed it to Earl Decker in a firebase medical tent east of the demilitarized zone, with both hands shaking and blood on the stock. "Make it home with it," Priest had said. His voice was already thinner than it should have been. Make it home. Earl had made it home. Raymond had not. He had laid in the jungle and read the wind through a single trembling leaf for 11 seconds, and then made the shot that kept 8 Marines alive on a ridgeline that had been making the enemy feel very confident for 3 days, and afterwards he had sat with his back against a tree and not moved for a long time. The rifle lay across his knees. Raymond lay somewhere he could not go back to. He had carried the rifle home to North Carolina in 1971 and put it in a cloth bag that smelled of his mother's cedar closet, and took it out once a year to clean it and put it back. He had not fired it since the jungle. He had not needed to. The memory vanished as quickly as it had come. The shop solidified around him. Fluorescent light, gun oil, the low murmur of the country song on the speaker. Craig Mercer's fingers were still on the chamois cloth. Earl Decker blinked once, slowly, and said nothing. Dustin Hale had finished pretending to stack boxes. He was watching the old man's face with an expression he could not quite name. Something between discomfort and the particular alertness that comes when a situation is wrong in a way you can feel in your back teeth before you can explain it. He had grown up around veterans. His grandfather had come back from Korea with a limp and a very quiet way of sitting in rooms, and Dustin recognized something in the old man at the counter that he had seen before. A stillness that was not passivity, a silence that was not surrender. He set down the box of 308 he was holding, walked to the back room, closed the door, and took out his phone. He called the Marine Corps recruiter's office 2 blocks over because it was the only military number he had saved, and Staff Sergeant Varela picked up on the second ring. Dustin said he knew this was going to sound crazy. Varela told him to spit it out. Dustin said there was an old man in the shop getting pushed around, and the old man's name was Earl Decker, and he had a rifle wrapped in a chamois, cloth that looked like it had been to a place he didn't want to imagine. And he had a tattoo on his left forearm that Dustin had glimpsed when. His sleeve rode up, a globe and anchor so faded it might have been a watercolor, with something above it that looked like a unit designation Dustin didn't recognize. He said the owner of the shop had his hand on the rifle and was about to throw the old man out, and everything about the way the old man was standing told Dustin this was wrong in a way he couldn't fully articulate, but couldn't ignore. The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. "Say that name again," Varela said. His voice had changed entirely, the professional ease gone, replaced by something taut and stripped down to its load-bearing elements. Dustin said it again. Another silence. Shorter this time. "Do not let anyone touch him," Varela said. "What is the address?" His voice was flat and fast and stripped of everything that was not information. "Do not let anyone touch him, and do not leave that room. Stay on the line." Dustin gave the address. He heard Varela repeat the name to someone else in the room, heard the sound of something scraping, a chair or a desk pushed back with urgency, heard a sharp single word that was either an oath or a command or both, and then heard Varela back on the line saying help is coming and you tell no one, and he was still talking when Dustin heard the second voice in the background get on another phone and begin saying the name to someone further up the chain. Not asking. Stating. The tone of a man delivering information that cannot wait for the other person to finish what they were doing. In a base operations building 14 miles north, a colonel named Reyes was reviewing a logistics report when a staff sergeant knocked and entered without waiting, which the staff sergeant had never done in 4 years of service, and which told Reyes everything he needed to know about the next 30 seconds before a word was said. The staff sergeant said the name. Reyes set down the report. He said confirm, and the staff sergeant confirmed, and Reyes was reaching for his cover before the sergeant finished the sentence, and the voice he used to tell his yeoman to have a vehicle ready was not the voice he used for logistics. It was a different register entirely. The yeoman had never heard it before. He had the vehicle ready in 4 minutes. Back in the shop, Craig Mercer had reached the point in his performance where he felt good about it. The man in the camo ball cap was watching. The woman waiting for her background check had drifted a few feet closer. Mercer had the floor, the audience, the authority, and the comfortable assurance of a man on his own property who has never in his life been wrong about a situation like this one. "Last chance, friend," he said, and this time he took his 2 fingers off the chamois cloth and placed his hand on Earl Decker's shoulder, a firm guiding grip, the kind of grip that is not technically aggressive but communicates a direction clearly, toward the door. Earl Decker did not move. He looked up at Mercer with those winter sky eyes and said, very quietly, "Son, I'd take your hand off. Not a threat, not a plea. Simply a statement of fact, delivered in the same tone a man uses to mention that the stove is hot." Mercer almost laughed. "Is that right?" He heard it before he saw it, a sound that began at the edge of perception and arrived fully formed before the mind could properly sequence the stages. A rising wail of sirens, more than one, close and getting closer with the accelerating certainty of something that has already decided where it is going. Then the deeper register underneath, engines, heavy ones, not one but several, the particular resonance of government vehicles driven by people who were not interested in the speed limit. The front windows of Mercer's tactical supply rattled in their frames. The door opened. He came in first, a Marine colonel in dress blues, a man who looked like the uniform had been built around him rather than the other way around, chest packed with ribbons that went back further than Mercer's entire career. Behind him, 2 military police officers took up positions on either side of the entrance without being told to. Behind them, through the window, Mercer could see 3 vehicles, 2 black government-plated SUVs and an MP cruiser, parked in the kind of tight, deliberate formation that is not an accident. The colonel did not look at Craig Mercer. He did not look at the man in the camo ball cap, or the woman by the counter, or the teenage employee who had emerged from the back and was pressed against the far wall. His eyes found Earl Decker immediately and moved directly to him with measured, deliberate steps, his polished shoes silent on the sealed concrete floor. He saw Mercer's hand on the old man's shoulder. His eyes narrowed to something that Mercer felt in his sternum before he consciously registered it. Mercer removed his hand. It happened fast, faster than he intended, before he had made a decision to do it. The colonel stopped 18 inches from Earl Decker. He looked at the old man for one long second. Then he brought his right hand up in the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise salute Craig Mercer had ever seen in 20 years of watching and receiving salutes. A salute directed at the old man in the worn canvas jacket, the faded gray work shirt, the jeans thin at the knees, and he held it there. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Nobody in the shop made a sound. The country music had stopped. The woman at the counter had her hand at her mouth. The man in the camo ball cap had gone the color of old chalk. Craig Mercer stood beside the counter he had built with his own hands and felt for the first time in a very long time that he had profoundly miscalculated something. The colonel lowered his salute. He turned then, for the first time, and looked at Craig Mercer. Not with anger. With something considerably worse, the kind of flat professional assessment that carries no heat, because it requires none. "I'm Colonel David Reyes, United States Marine Corps," he said, "and with your permission I would like to tell everyone in this room who is standing next to you." He did not wait for permission. Earl Joseph Decker, 81 years old. United States Marine Corps, honorably discharged, 1973, service record, Vietnam, Cung Tra Province, Tha Thinh, Hue Province, operations classified and unclassified, 1968 through 1971. Mac SOG attachment, 1969 to 1971. Confirmed kills, 44. Unconfirmed, additional. Awards: 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, 1 Silver Star, the Navy Cross, and the Distinguished Service Cross. 3 Purple Hearts. The colonel paused, picked up a breath. The room held its own. The rifle in that cloth, the one your hand was on, was the personal weapon of Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Pryor, Khe Sanh veteran, who passed it to Lance Corporal Decker in 1969 with 8 months left on his own life. Sergeant Decker used it to make a confirmed kill at 1,840 meters in the Cung Truor Highlands that saved the lives of 11 Marines pinned on a ridgeline. That shot was the longest confirmed kill in Marine Corps history for 19 years. It still appears in the record books. He paused again, and his voice was precise and level and showed nothing except the absolute discipline of a man who was very, very angry. The enemy had a name for Sergeant Decker. They called him the Shadow of Cung Tra, because he had a way of appearing on ridgelines where he was not supposed to be and ensuring that certain situations resolved themselves. When his name came over the radio in certain compounds, operations were canceled. That was the weight of the name. "And that name," the colonel said, "is the name you put your hand on today." Craig Mercer said nothing. There was nothing in his mouth. The consequences were handled with the brisk efficiency of an institution that has processed a great many errors made by people who should have known better. The colonel spoke briefly with the military police officers. A formal complaint was logged. An inquiry was opened into whether Mercer's federal firearms dealer license, the document that allowed him to operate the business he had spent 11 years building, should be reviewed in light of the incident and any prior complaints. It was not the end of Mercer's business, but it was the beginning of a period during which he would understand, with clarity he had not previously possessed, what it cost to be wrong about something in the presence of someone who was keeping records. It took Earl Decker 4 minutes to gather his chamois cloth and retie the cord and lift the rifle from the counter. He did it without hurry. He turned to leave and then stopped, and he turned back, and he walked to where Craig Mercer stood, with his arms at his sides and the color still not entirely back in his face. Earl placed his right hand on Mercer's left shoulder, the same shoulder Mercer had gripped minutes before, and held it there for a moment. "You've got fire in you," he said. His voice was the same unhurried rasp it had been from the start. "I could see it when I walked in. That's worth something. It really is." He paused. "But fire that doesn't know what it's aimed at burns the man holding it worse than anything else." He took his hand away. He looked at Mercer for one more second with those pale blue eyes. Something to think on. He walked out. The colonel held the door. 6 weeks later, a Tuesday morning in October, Earl Decker was sitting in the third booth from the back at Millie's Diner on Route 9 with a cup of black coffee in the sports section of the local paper, which he read the same way he did everything, without hurry, beginning to end, column by column. The diner smelled of bacon grease and maple syrup and the particular warmth of a kitchen that starts work at 5 in the morning and means it. Outside, the leaves were going copper and amber in the low October light. A man sat down across from him. Earl looked up. Craig Mercer was thinner than he had been. The institutional certainty had gone out of his posture the way heat goes out of a stone in evening, gradually, and then all at once. He was wearing civilian clothes. He looked like someone who had spent 6 weeks being rearranged by something he could not argue with. "I owe you an apology," Mercer said. "A real one. Not the one I had to give the MP." He put both hands flat on the table and looked at the man across from him. "I didn't see you. I looked right at you, and I didn't see anything except what I decided to see before you opened your mouth. And that was a failure of the thing I was supposed to have learned in the service. And I'm sorry." Earl Decker set his coffee cup down. He looked at Mercer for a moment, just long enough for Mercer to understand the look was not a calculation but simply attention, the genuine, undivided kind. "Sit down, son," he said. He pushed the coffee toward the edge of the table and raised 2 fingers at the waitress across the room, and she was already reaching for a second mug before his hand came down. They sat there in the October morning, the older man and the younger one, with the sound of the kitchen and the smell of coffee and the amber light coming through the window, and Earl turned to the sports section, and Mercer sat quietly with his hands around his cup, and neither of them said anything for a while. There was no discomfort in the silence. There was something else in it, something that felt, if you were paying the right kind of attention, like the beginning of a correction. Somewhere in America, right now, a man in a worn canvas jacket smelling of rain and wood smoke is sitting in a diner, or walking a hardware store aisle, or standing at the back of a crowd watching something unfold, and nobody in the room knows his name. And if you were to ask the right people the wrong questions, the silence on the other end of the line would tell you everything. If you were moved by Earl Decker's story of quiet courage and timeless wisdom, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes. And ring that notification bell so you never miss a story about the quiet warriors who walk among us every day.